Okay, well let's get started. I think there's going to be a few more folks joining us here, but let's get started. Given it's a nice, beautiful August after evening here, and I want to make sure we end on time so you can at least enjoy the rest of your evenings. So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend our workshop here, our Startup Hacks workshop on building your first product. This is a community workshop run by Surrey Digital Academy. And I'm really excited to be hosting this because we've got, in addition to talking about a really interesting topic, which is about building products, we've got a couple of fantastic speakers joining us today. We've got two speakers who will be talking about their experiences with building a product. And then we've got sort of a small workshop where we'll get everyone who's interested to actually build out a landing page using either MailChimp, or if they've got a little bit of coding experience, they can see how quickly and easy it is to build something using a couple of other publicly and freely available tools. So just try to keep your mics muted as much as possible to minimize any background noise. But other than that, let's dive right in. So I recognize many of the folks who've joined the workshop here, and a few that look like new participants. So to welcome. My name is Harish Rezangani. I currently work as a tech consultant for a handful of different companies spanning different industries, from blockchain to fintech, to a private school. And having spent sort of more than 10 years in tech, this is sort of an opportunity for me, being sort of raised here in the city of Surrey, to be able to do stuff within the community by running these types of workshops. And generally, we've done that through the Learn and Talk Tech Surrey Meetup group. But in addition to that, I run the Surrey Digital Academy school here, which is focused on delivering premium digital skills training courses for both adults and kids. And I'm happy to connect with the members of the community here. I always love interacting with folks. So if you want to connect with me either over LinkedIn, or if you're a developer and you prefer GitHub, happy to connect with you over those social channels. So we all know that we're sort of navigating here through unprecedented times, and there's of course the personal health aspect to be mindful of, the public safety aspect to be mindful of, and looking at all those spin-off challenges created by COVID-19. It's actually interesting to come across this particular article in the Harvard Business Review, which was talking about how folks are taking their COVID-19 related solutions that are sort of private businesses, and making them sort of more full-fledged viable businesses. And so it kind of led me to think about doing a workshop around this particular topic, because there's talk of a second wave, but I think there's definitely merit in sort of looking at what sort of online businesses can be developed in such a time that could serve as maybe a side hustle, or sort of another little business on the side, or maybe something that you might consider turning into your full scale business. And so often the best innovations are created in response to specific urgent or large scale problems, and a global pandemic certainly fits that bill. Uh, this article in particular tries to address how does the solutions coming out of this pandemic sort of sustain solving problems for the long term. We've seen a massive jump in individuals and companies building or fabricating masks, but what are we talking about here in terms of a long-term viable business? Um, this was also an interesting article here, on sort of the most in-demand side hustles you can do from home, and just taking a look at the list of different businesses here. We've got everything from digital marketing services, and by that I mean being able to blog, be able to build websites, being able to handle social media, web or mobile app development, graphic design, UI design, product testing. There's been an explosion in teaching and tutoring anything that folks are good at. And of course, as students and parents are forced to be indoors, everything from tutoring, math to courses to fitness, life coaching, mentorship, all of these are now turned into these side hustles that can be developed and delivered through online platforms. Selling custom handmade products to podcasting. Everyone seems to be now offering some sort of podcast, and of course other delivery services with sort of minimal touch points in the current circumstances. So nearly all these side hustles or businesses that I quickly mentioned here require using some sort of online tool. And if you happen to know how to code, even just the basics, then you can really gain some serious leverage by making better technical decisions and even reducing your overhead, your operational overhead. Of course, learning anything new can be intimidating, and so our goal here is to talk about how you can go about quickly building an online product or service offering, even if you haven't done any coding before, and looking at what sort of freely available tools are available for you to be able to go ahead and do that. So in that context, we just take a quick look at the sort of outline for today. So we'll talk a little bit about this concept of a minimum viable product and what that process looks like. We'll look at some very famous examples from history. We'll then sort of pass it over to our two entrepreneur speakers to talk a little bit about their projects. We'll keep that sort of as a bit of a presentation and then a Q&A session with each of our speakers. And then we'll actually get you to create your own MVP, looking at a few publicly available tools at your disposal to being able to do that very quickly. And then the last little bit will just be a wrap up and any additional Q&A. So starting at sort of the high level in terms of what is a minimum viable product or an MVP. At its core, an MVP is about solving a problem with the most basic solution so that you can evaluate your product market fit before investing the time and resources to be able to build a full-fledged product. You're essentially just trying to collect the maximum amount of learning with the least amount of effort. And this is, of course, an iterative process which you can apply to any industry. Given our focus here on sort of online services and businesses, I'll be predominantly looking at it from the perspective of the tech world, but this can again be applied to really any industry. If we're talking about a web or a mobile app MVP, that should be designed with really just the most sufficient, the basic sufficient and minimum features to help you test that offering in the market and be able to gauge the interest from your users or consumers. So Reid Hoffman, who's one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, had this famous line where he says, if you're not essentially embarrassed by the first version of the product that you've shipped out, you've basically shipped it too late, which kind of highlights that, the intent here is not to be a perfectionist. It's really to get something that meets the basic sort of features to test your hypothesis out into the marketplace to be able to collect that valuable feedback, which you can use to iterate your product. Some of the key reasons on why you would want to build an MVP would be to get your idea to market, obviously, as quickly as possible, to keep your costs low, to find out what your customers' needs are and really understand the customer and the user stories as quickly as possible. It's also beneficial to find those early adopters who would be part of your client base, sort of your pool of early adopters to be able to test out different iterations of your product. And of course, as you go through this iterative cycle, being able to identify maybe some other needs that you could be meeting with your application and different problems that you could be solving are also valuable feedback points that you can then go through with your iteration process. So in a nutshell, your minimum viable product gives you the chance to test the product with your consumers or users, evaluates performance in how it best meets their needs. So let's take a look at some famous examples to kind of put additional context around what a minimum viable product may look like. And these are all sort of relatively famous companies now. So this is Amazon.com's MVP. And again, put in the context that this is from sort of the mid 90s here. But this is their MVP when they were trying to test out their hypothesis. Will people be willing to buy books online versus the convention at the time, which was going into brick and mortar shops like Chapters or Borders? And then, of course, iterating from here, they sort of expanded to look at the question, well, will people be willing to buy anything online? And of course, now we see Amazon.com is the global marketplace that it is. Facebook, or the Facebook as it started out, wasn't a new idea when it first launched. It was rather the simplicity of their approach and their core focus on colleges and being able to do some very basic things very well. And leveraging sort of the social hierarchy to some extent really made them successful. But you can kind of gauge just what they started out with here, with something very basic, very simple, the ability to sort of connect with folks in your school. Groupon. So their MVP was using a simple WordPress website and collecting subscriber emails and sending those subscribers just regular PDFs with coupons, and sort of gauging that interest and growing their subscriber base. They then sort of followed up by building out their own voucher system and scaling their business. But this is where they started with. Zappos. So rather than conducting extensive and expensive market research, the founder of Zappos, Nick Swinmurn, built a very basic website where he would approach a shoe store, click the pictures of the shoes, and then place them on his site to see if anyone would actually buy them. And once he received an order, he would go out to the store and buy those shoes and then ship them out. And so by just sort of testing a hypothesis, whether somebody would go to a dedicated shoe website and buy shoes, allowed him to then build out this company, which was later acquired by Amazon for over $1 billion. So again, the whole point here with these MVPs, get something out in the marketplace, be able to test your hypothesis, being able to collect that valuable feedback, iterate quickly, and then look at that information to then sort of develop and scale your product. And lastly, here's Uber. So Uber's MVP was to essentially test back in 2010 whether drivers who owned, whether iPhone owners in San Francisco were willing to take rides from drivers, and for those users to share their credit card information within this little known app. And so again, just sort of testing the hypothesis, and turned into what we know Uber to be the global tech company today. So the steps to building out an MVP, I'm actually just going to share the link to this guide, because I don't think we necessarily need to get into the full details here. I'm going to just share this in the Zoom chat. But I'm just going to kind of walk through a few of the steps here just to give you sort of a feel for what this process looks like. And so starting with the market research, before embarking on building out your MVP and going through a very fairly detailed development process, do your research and gauge how your idea fulfills the target user's needs. And you can sort of conduct this research in a variety of relatively low-cost ways. So it could be everything from conducting surveys, sort of seeing who signs up to take advantage of your offering, pledges, commitments, pre-orders, whatever the metric might be, to appropriately gauge what level of interest you're getting about your idea. When you're expressing your idea, be extremely clear how your product or service delivers value to its users, and what's sort of your value proposition. What is it that distinguishes your offering from everything else that might be out there in the marketplace? In terms of designing a process and the user flow, when you're getting to the point of actually building this, think about this from the user's perspective. I think there is a tendency to sort of look at, what might be the quick and easy way to get something into the hands. And while that is a motivation, you want to make sure that what you're sort of designing sort of is from the user's perspective, and that the user experience and flow is sort of given that paramount importance. When you list out your MVP features, the step is not just listing those features, but also prioritizing them in terms of what might go in your very first iteration, and then looking at what then might be built in sort of future subsequent iterations. You can also create just what's called an MVP prototype. And that's also very important to be able to understand the user stories, essentially being able to understand, why it is that they want your product in addition to what it is they want. And these prototypes can sort of take multiple forms. They could be, just a very basic landing page or a splash page, but it could also just be, what we call in the tech space vaporware, where you may have something that looks and sort of tries to mimic the behavior of your app, but it could just be a PowerPoint presentation with slides that you kind of click through. But again, the idea is to sort of get that early feedback through a low-cost means. When building out your MVP, keep in mind that the MVP still needs to sort of fulfill your customers' needs. It needs to be sort of easy to use. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be suitable for the purpose of getting that valuable user feedback. And then you get to that stage once you've got your first iteration where you build, measure, and learn. And so this is the iteration cycle where you take your learnings from your first iteration, take that feedback, improve the product for the next MVP cycle. And really through each iteration, the goal is to have something that the user can actually use. It needs to be what we say shippable. So when you're looking at the iterative process, it should look something like we see in this bottom image here, where at each stage you've got something that you can use as opposed to sort of components of what might be your final product. So having something that's sort of usable at each step is highly important as part of this MVP process. In creating the MVP, so we can sort of look at it from a few perspectives. You can, if you know some basic coding or more detailed coding, you can build it yourself. There's plenty of third-party applications and packages that you can use, and we'll sort of explore a couple of those. You can look at local development firms. Locally here, we've got companies like Unbounce that offer these services for online services, or you can just outsource it. We live in sort of a globally connected world, and given sort of the recent pandemic, that sort of element of being able to work remotely is become a lot more mainstream. So that's definitely an option as well. So in line with Surrey Digital Academy's tagline of anyone can code, we want to sort of focus a bit on the benefits of knowing some coding basics to be able to build out your prototype and your MVPs. So this is where I'm going to direct it over to our two speakers. First up, I'll pass it over to Aman Chahal, who's the founder of CleanTecher. And she's, in addition to being an engineer and a data scientist and a policy analyst, just a great person to connect with, who's got some fantastic insight at multiple levels. And so she's going to talk a little bit about her app for tracking power demand and sort of looking at how you can sort of shift the power demand in certain geographies to be able to provide greater reliability of energy and being able to also change consumption habits. So I'll get you to maybe share your screen, and you can take it away.
Let me know if you guys can see the screen. I'm just going to say, no sound.
That's a fantastic background, by the way.
Thank you very much. Can you see the screen right now?
Yes, I can see it here now.
Perfect. You should be seeing a presentation here. I actually want to show new screen. I actually want to first address a really interesting thing that Hari said about your MVP should originally be very embarrassing. So what I want to do is I'm going to show you the embarrassing version of the MVP. and then the point at which someone took pity on me and told me perhaps I should learn to code a little bit better. And then I'll go through the actual technology that we're developing and show you what ended up happening with the final MVP that we created, just so you get a bit of context on why you might be trying to illustrate what your website or your final product's going to be like. Just sometimes you're not necessarily talking to end customers, you're talking to investors, or you're talking to other partners in the ecosystem that you have to explain your technology to, and having a bit of an anchor is sometimes a little bit helpful just for them to understand how the tech would work. So what you should be seeing right now is a very basic internet page that has a giant insignia on it. All it says is CleanTecher, power supply is good, you're using, and then it says 10 kilowatts. Is that the same screen you guys see?
Yep.
Right. So this is something that I originally tried to make. The reason why I tried to build this is because I was finding it really hard to explain to people what the user journey would be when I had created the final technology that I was going for. So what I did is I just created this and I sent it off to about 20 of my closest friends, who received a very cryptic email with no description. And I wanted them to kind of work through it and see, how it would work. So, this is just, they would click through and then they would end up at a final screen, and none of them really understood what was the point of what they were doing. Like, it didn't quite make any sense to any of them. So with that said, what I had actually wanted them to sort of understand and see is this presentation that I'll share with you, and I'll go through it. And then we'll go to the actual MVP that I ended up creating after taking the coding class. So basically, in a nutshell, if I'm looking at this and I'm explaining the business problem, I'm tackling the problem within electricity markets. So what happens right now is, in a lot of countries like India or Africa, you end up having a level of scarcity with electricity. And what that does is it creates an environment in which people have to, the utilities end up causing a forced blackout so that they can conserve the amount of power and then give it out to certain jurisdictions, just because the peak demand goes up really, really fast and it goes up really, really high. The added complexity to this is that utilities can't actually work behind the meter. So if you want to put a solar panel up on your house and then give that electricity back into the utilities network, that's not actually something that most utilities are able to deal with, by virtue of the fact that they have very old grids. So what we're trying to build is a network similar to this. So this is basically the current state where, let's say you're in this utility network that I'm illustrating on the left-hand side of the screen. One of these houses is telling you that, the utility decided this entire neighborhood had to be cut off in order to conserve power so the other houses or the other neighborhoods could stay on. Now, they don't really have the capacity to pick and choose which houses will stay on and which will go off, so they just cut electricity to everybody. So in a country like India, you see that some houses will still have some power, and the reason for them having some power is that they probably have backup power. They might have a diesel genset, they might have some batteries that they bring to use when they need to kind of bring that power in. And so a few houses will have a little bit of electricity just because of that. Now, our proposed approach is really to connect all of the homes through a digital infrastructure. So effectively an application that warns people that the power is about to go out. Once that warning takes place, what we are enabling with our technology is that some homes that require or need to have a lot more power on can actually pay other homes to turn off their power. So if my neighbor has an inverter, they have a large battery, and let's say, I at my home have elderly parents and they need to have the electricity on, it's the summertime, they can't be without the AC. I pay a bunch of my neighbors and say, listen, if you guys turn off your power and I use it, I'll just pay you for like 1x or 2x on that consumption. And by doing that, you end up rearranging the grid effectively. So that, in a nutshell, is the technology we're trying to build. There's a digital component to it, there's a physical component to it, and then there's sort of an AI machine learning component to it. Explaining this piece is very difficult because it doesn't exist right now. So what I really needed to do when I was starting off is cut down like a half-hour explanation for how a customer would approach this and how a customer would see this, and be able to explain that to, you know, a business partner or potential partnership within like 3 or 5 minutes. And in order to do that, what I did is I created this application. Can you see? You should be seeing a new screen that says "Welcome Queen Techer" with the web app. Is that the screen you guys see?
That's still your slide deck.
Do you see it now?
Yep. Yep.
Perfect. So this application, or this front end, so what I created is the front end of how a user would experience working with this application. So you can see that I built it from front to the last piece of it, just because I wanted, people tend to ask you questions during a meeting that are just easier to illustrate graphically. So I got a lot of questions about, let's say you're a new user, how do you interface with this? How do you build that out? And sometimes you don't anticipate the type of question you're going to get. But if you're sitting down and you, if you work through it as if you are a new user, it helps you sort of iron out a lot of the kinks that you're going to experience as you go forward. So this isn't by any means perfect, but you can kind of see now that this would be the user journey as they kind of walk through the application. You know, this would be where they would set up their payments and everything. And this is really the page that, you know, I would want to direct someone to. So this is where the true MVP part of it starts. It's a little bit more on the prototype side, but if you were a customer or if you were a business partner now, and you ask me how this would work for the customer, I can easily walk you through this page and say, look, on a general basis, let's say your house is using 15 kilowatts of electricity. We'd show you how much you usually use, whether or not you're higher on the higher end or lower end, and then how you compare to your neighbors. And then when an electricity event is about to occur, you get a warning. So I can now walk you through the actual journey that a customer would experience, the choices they would have to work with it, and kind of tell you, you know, this is how easy the application would be, and, you know, you confirm whether or not you want to buy electricity or you want to sell it, and that's really the end of the journey. This itself is really like a 5-page illustration of what the customer would experience, and it used to take me about 30 minutes to explain, you know, in pieces how this would happen. And ever since I developed the app, or the front end of the app, it's sort of shortened down the time, and it's very easy for people to anchor their understanding of how this would work based on just looking at the application. One of the things that, you know, for some technologies, you might have multiple pieces to the application. So ours would have some physical switches as well, but having something to look at is very easy for someone to frame the problem in their mind. So for that reason, having the MVP was really just phenomenally helpful for me. The demo is also, so in terms of a demo, if you're going to look for funding, you're going to ask for investors to come on board, even if you're looking for friends and family rounds, having just a PowerPoint presentation doesn't really cut it, because a lot of people want to see that you have more than an idea, that you're actually working towards doing something. There's some more teeth to the idea. And just seeing a website live is very helpful for someone else to say, okay, you know what, this is beyond just a concept. It's a little bit more meaty than that. And this is the third one is a little bit of my personal bias. I've worked now with 5 or 6 startups where people have either tried to launch their own products or they're working towards launching their own products. And if the founder doesn't have some level of coding experience, you really do become sort of hostage to the other coders that you're bringing on board to be able to change things. And even small changes, let's say the language you don't like, or your customer testing the application. And, you know, there's small little things where like the button isn't designed in a way that the user understands it. Any of those changes become very difficult to do in the prototyping stage if you're sort of hostage to a developer and you don't really know how to do any type of coding whatsoever. So I personally believe that the founders should at least be able to MacGyver their way around some level of code. And doing a workshop and doing a boot camp is usually just invaluable to be able to do those types of pieces. I know two of my friends who are also co-founders of their own companies are sort of at this place wondering whether or not they need to bring in somebody new to be able to do the code or somebody else. And a lot of these questions can be sort of solved if you're the front end person and you can kind of MacGyver some level of code yourself. I'll pause there. I'll give it back to Harish and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, thank you so much for going through that. Just open it up if anyone's got any questions for Amin on any of what you covered.
I think I'm in the clear.
Got actually I just realized that the comments here seem to be restricted just to me here, so I'm just going to make it publicly available here. Okay. So question from Vikram here was, is this only applicable to photovoltaic systems?
There is no technology restriction to the actual application. We would, it wouldn't even care if you had a diesel genset. The reason why it becomes clean tech is because a diesel genset would not be economical given the economics of solar and wind. So we don't care what technology you're using behind the meter. This is probably one of the biggest problems with renewable energy is that intermittence is caused by different types of techs that you're bringing in, and we don't care. We would take care of the intermittence at the end of it.
Cool. Question from PG here. Could it work such that for folks could upload to the grid or mesh with their neighbors? So maybe be able to I guess feed back into the grid.
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges with feeding back into the grid is not equipped to take your electricity. You are probably giving the grid electricity when the grid already has electricity, which is why the demand is low and you want to get rid of yours. So that is actually an architecture that we want to avoid. And for that reason, we're incentivizing the reorganization of the consumption, so the time of consumption. So what you would do then is if you had, say, a solar panel and a battery set, you would use your own electricity. You would save as much electricity in the battery as you could. And during a peak power event, you would then turn yourself off and go off of your own power. At scale, when the technology is diffused enough, then you would be able to see which areas have a larger amount of demand and which areas have a larger amount of capacity to provide that demand. And then you can start building physical infrastructure that would connect those jurisdictions. Until such time that the physical infrastructure is rearranged and connected, putting power back into the grid at a time when the grid does not need it is actually very damaging and limits the amount of renewables you'd be able to.
And maybe just one question from my end is, you know, with some of these jurisdictions you're talking about, how does sort of theft of electricity sort of play a part, and sort of where do you see that sort of factoring in with your app?
Yeah, so for us, if you're stealing electricity and you're trying to sell electricity, it's detrimental to you. You know, so at the end, it's like however much you're using, however much you're putting on, like it's detrimental to you to have that architecture. We would have our own switch. So I was talking to Harish, I bought these, this is part of my MVP. We're building the switch with Arduinos. So we would have a switch that basically measures how much electricity is coming in or being stopped from going out, like your live consumption. And we'd go off of that as our measurement. But if you're using the amount of work you'd have to do like every time to go out there and like reverse the meter, put the magnet back on to like look back, it's not worth it for you.
Awesome. Any other questions for Evan? If there are, maybe I'll just suggest that you can just type them into the Zoom chat here, and we'll try to address them maybe towards the end. I do want to pass it over now to Clayton to talk a little bit about sort of his MVP. But Evan, thanks a lot for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Clayton, you there?
All right.
There.
All right. So super excited to be here. This is awesome. I will go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you guys can see it now.
Yep.
All right, perfect. So yeah, just to go a little bit before we get started, a little bit about myself. I'm Amy. I'm a digital project manager by day, and I'm a developer by night. And a little bit of what my presentation is going to be about today is kind of what that looks like, what it looks like to have a side gig, especially in times like we are facing now when we're starting to think of building these new skills. And I really want to focus on some of the things around what skills you might want to develop, some lessons learned that I've had, and a little bit more about the MVP model and how I like to use it. So just a bit of an overview. We're going to begin by talking about what the lifestyle is like to be a developer, especially if you're considering taking up these skills. It's a long road, but it's a very fun road, I like to find. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to be an effective developer. So how you can get those skills running really fast without feeling overwhelmed with all the things that you have to learn. So you don't have to feel like you have to get a whole degree in computer science before you can actually do some effective work. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about building large apps with a small team. That's a little bit more on the project management side and how you can kind of work with clients and deliver products that really work for them really well with just a couple people. Sometimes it might only be yourself. So having a side gig as a developer, there's tons of opportunity, and this is a great option for almost anyone, I would say. There are so many jobs. There are we need way too many developers. There's never enough of them. There's always companies looking for little ones here, little ones there that can do side gigs, that can help out with when they're overloaded with client work. We're always constantly looking for them. And I know even in my project management role, we're always hiring more developers. Maybe we'll get temporary ones or just ones that will work full time. So a little bit on the lifestyle. What's cool about being a developer and kind of was unique up until a couple months ago was that you often can work from home. I know a lot of us are doing that now, so it's not as exciting as it once was. But on that point, I've known developers that have worked all across the world. They basically just travel with their laptop and they work from any country that they want to, and that's a really cool benefit of being able to do most of your job completely from a laptop. And of course, the challenges. So along with anything, there are going to be a lot of challenges. There are tons of challenges when it comes to feeling things like imposter syndrome and feeling like you haven't learned enough. There are lots of challenges when it comes to the fact that you are at a laptop all day, and oftentimes maybe you'll switch to a notebook or something like that or write notes. But a lot of people, you have to be comfortable with the fact that you're working with a computer and you're going to be in front of a computer most of the day. So what I want to talk about a little bit is how to be an effective developer as fast as possible. So when it comes to being an effective developer, one of the big issues that I always ran into, and I know tons of developers that run into, is the issue of overlearn. So essentially what that means is there's so much information out there and there's not enough time to learn it all, even though sometimes we feel like we might want to or might need to get a specific job done. And this kind of rolls into the MVP model where it's all about saying no to things that you don't need to do now and saying yes to things that are essential to launching a product, to getting it to the next stage, to building a feature, and just focusing on what you need to know instead of what you want to know or what you might think you need to know. If it doesn't move the dial forward or push a feature forward, you probably don't need to know it now. You might be able to learn it later. But of course, being effective over being busy. This is a big one. And I know a lot of people in almost any career are going to run into this one quite often. And there's a big difference between being busy which just means you're doing things, and being effective, which means you're moving the needle forward, which means you're pushing towards completing something. And you always want to ask yourself, especially when you're on a small team and your time and your resources are restricted, is the thing I'm doing completing what we need to do? Is it building the bicycle, or is it polishing the chrome on the side? And you really have to ask yourself that, because it's going to be important, especially when you're working on a small team. And of course, the benefits of taking it slow. This, in my opinion, is a huge one. The more time you take to think out a problem, the more time you take to write out your problem and break it down into as many steps as you can, and then sometimes break it down again on a piece of paper, it's going to save you so much time in the long run. I can't talk, or I can't imagine how many times I would have had to go back and change a bunch of code and rewrite a bunch of code, and really waste a lot of my time and waste a lot of the client's time if I hadn't thought things through from the beginning. And I know early on in my career, I was much more, let's just write code. That's the fun part. Let's get to it. But I've realized over the years that taking it slow, thinking it out, is a really huge benefit. And of course, what else would be complete without my specialty, of course, which is building large apps with a super small team. I've almost exclusively worked with a small team of one or two, and we've found ways to be extremely effective with that number. It's kind of a nice thing to work on a small team. You don't often have things that overlap with other workers. You can work really quickly, and oftentimes what you'll find is there's kind of a dropping off of the efficiency as you start to increase team members. I've worked on larger teams as well, and there's a certain number where you kind of hit a sweet spot based on the application that you're building, and based on what you're trying to do, if it's going to be super effective. So what that kind of brings us into is the minimum viable product. For me, this has been one of the most efficient and most effective ways of delivering a usable product to a client without getting bogged down in all the details. It's really important, and it kind of brings together this whole idea of launching something is a way of testing something. And we can't really plan for things that we don't know. It's the whole thing where if you make an assumption, you're making an asset of you and me. And what you often will find is that the best way and the most effective way of building something is to just get it out there, see how it works, see how it actually works in people's hands, and then start to make changes and start to iterate on those changes. And oftentimes we use a process that's essentially like an MVP 1, an MVP 2, an MVP 3, and you can kind of think of those as like the different versions of a product, and that's been really effective. And it's really easy, especially if you're trying to deliver things to a client. You can say, hey, we're gonna build these 3 features. When that's complete, we'll have the next phase of payments or whatever it is that you're doing, and then you can break down the actual process for a client, and they can more easily track how their application is being built, especially if you're building something for a third party. And then, of course, there's thinking at scale. Thinking at scale is huge, especially if you're a small team. You have to manage your resources correctly, and then you also have to manage the way that you are building an application. There's tons of popular explanations and popular examples of teams that weren't necessarily thinking at scale, and when they did scale, they had a bunch of issues. One of the really popular ones that I like to bring up is something like Twitter. Twitter is an interesting case because a lot of people don't know this, but at one point they were building their entire backend on Ruby, which is a great language and it's very efficient. But at a certain scale, and especially at the scale that Twitter got to, it's huge, right? It actually slows down quite a bit and it gets a little bit bogged down in itself. So Twitter actually had to go through and rebuild the entire back end of their application while it was live, while it was live, while users were using it. And they had to rebuild the entire thing, which is kind of scary. It's like rebuilding the engine of your plane while you're flying it. So you don't want to find yourself in those situations. So if you can think ahead and you can think at scale, that's really going to help. And of course, I always say leveraging tools. Leveraging the tools is so important. There's so many great developer tools out there. There are developer tools like Heroku, which is great for hosting apps. There are all these different things that will take away or unburden you from parts that you might have otherwise had to do yourself. And I really love a lot of these tools, and I can't emphasize them enough. I use them all the time. If it's something that helps you push the needle faster to where you want it to be, it's a great way of doing that. Um, and of course, managing a project from the bottom up. Now, this is more of a project manager approach that I think is just really efficient and really effective for getting the timing right and getting the deliverables right for a client. So you can end up actually delivering a product uh, and over delivering something that makes a client really happy. And oftentimes that comes from talking to the people who are actually building the application and using estimates and times and assessments from them rather than trying to manage down and saying, hey, you've got 4 days to complete this feature, please get it done. You might actually find that if you were a developer or you had some of these skills and you can understand from the bottom up what that process looks like, you can really reduce times and you can say, hey, you know what, that only takes 2 days. I can bang that out. I can get that finished and I can move on to something else. Or, hey, I need an extra day on this. And it gives you a lot better project management skills. And I think that's essential, especially if you're trying to run your own business and you're trying to run your own development business. You really want to make sure that you're managing your own time and you're managing the time so that the client is happy and can have whatever you're building delivered within that time. And that kind of wraps up what I want to talk about today. So if there's any specific questions, I'm more than happy to take them at this point.
Okay, looks like you've got a couple here with what was messaged in Zoom. So the first from Evan was just if you know what Twitter was rewritten in. And Peter's asking if you can give more examples of sort of the tools that you use for leverage. What are some of your preferred tools to use?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So for tools, a big part is that it depends on what you're doing. For example, let's say there are tons of WordPress sites, and let's say you've gotten a job to build a WordPress site. If you look around, you're going to find lots of hosting sites that are specialized and built for WordPress. An example is like Kinsta, where they basically take care of creating staging sites for you. They take care of database backups if you need it. They take care of the actual hosting as well. So you don't have to go to something like Amazon Web Services or something that's more of a generic server and have to build all this yourself, where you're building the staging now and you're building the actual databases and those sorts of things that are custom built for whatever you're trying to do will help a lot. And another example is like Heroku. Heroku is great for hosting little apps and hosting MVPs. And essentially, if you're using something like React.js, which is a really popular front-end framework, they actually have a one-button deployment with Heroku where you just enter one line of code and it's deployed and active and it's up. Things like that are great time savers.
Any other questions for Clayton? Clayton, is there an MVP that comes to mind that you've recently worked on that you want to maybe just highlight?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I've been working on lately some rather interesting projects. One of which is a film product, which is like a new version of Netflix, essentially. But what we found really useful with that project is, of course, we use the MVP model, but working closely with the actual project manager as well as the client in delivering something that's really efficient and effective. And oftentimes, what we say to them is, we say, "Okay, what do you want this to be? What does it look like?" And we start to immediately create like user stories, and the user stories are really what illustrates the features that come out of those. And the features that come out of those are what you put into your MVP. And that's a way of easily testing things and easily getting things out. And oftentimes what you'll find is that almost anything that you can build or that you want to build has been done before. And oftentimes that's a huge bonus, because if it's been done before, you know it can be done again. And oftentimes the resources out there are great. When it comes down to it, most applications are really actually similar. There is just a database that's reading and writing information, and then a user that's inputting some sort of information or making changes to that information. And that is essentially the backbone of every application. And once you have those core components down, um, and you understand how they come together, anything beyond that is just semantics, or is just a specific skill set that might modify that data. So let's say if there's a data science approach, you might have something that will manipulate that data to better show results to a user or something like that. So anything beyond that is just manipulating those things in further ways. But really, just the core is just that piece. Yeah, in my opinion.
Okay. PJ was asking, you had mentioned, was it Casta that is the WordPress system?
So for instance, Kinsta is like one I've
Kinsta.
used, Kinsta, I believe. There's lots of them out there, though. If you search around, you'll find lots of dedicated services that will essentially work for the type of thing that you're building. So if it's React, if it's Angular, if it's WordPress, if it's Drupal, there's going to be people out there that really help with these things, and they've built their entire business around doing that. And there's no reason to not use them, because they're just going to save you time.
Awesome. And maybe we'll just wrap it up with this question here. So when you're sort of either working with maybe a language you're not the most familiar with, or you're doing a little bit of learning on something, where do you go? What's sort of your go-to resource for being able to learn maybe either a new language or learn a new system? Where would you go?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, learning a new thing, that's essentially what being a developer is. You're never going to know everything, and if you do, then that's that's amazing. No, but honestly, the most often I use Google all the time, like any other person. There's Stack Overflow. It's a great resource. There are my favorite resource for if you're doing web development is Mozilla's developer network. That is just a great resource. It's super well documented. They can explain almost any part of the web to you. Definitely MDN. That would be the short version of that name. So if you search up, how to do this thing, MDN, oftentimes there will be an article dedicated to that. Really well written, very much up to date. That's a great resource.
Awesome. And in terms of sort of programming languages out there, like what are you currently sort of using more often than not with your projects today? And what are you sort of seeing as being sort of a good go-to programming language to learn?
Absolutely. In my opinion, JavaScript is taking over the world. And I think that's what a lot of developers are looking to. It's one of the only languages that is essential for web, and is also can be used for building actual applications using Node. So it's super versatile in that way. It can't really be replaced. There's things like PHP, which is a templating language. It can also be used for certain applications, but it can be replaced by JSX. It can be replaced by Ruby's versions, or many other versions of templating languages. But really, at the core, JavaScript can't be replaced. So when it comes to that, it's always going to be used for web, and web is more popular than ever. And it can also be used for actual applications. But of course, depending on what you're building, JavaScript might not scale efficiently for things like video games. So certain ones it might work, but you might be looking at C# or something like that for that. Yeah, it depends on the application. But JavaScript is a huge one.
Awesome. Any other questions for Clayton? I got a question here from Abel. Do you have any tips or tools for learning basic backend structures like databases?
Absolutely. Yeah. So databases is a big one that I actually started moving to hosted databases quite recently, and I love it. Like there are so many great hosted services that are free, and you can use maybe up to like 15 gigabytes or something like that, or 5 gigabytes, depends on the service. But for example, like one is Atlas, that's MongoDB. That one's really easy to learn. It's really easy to get started with, and you don't actually have to write queries like SQL. So things like that are great. I really, I always think that object-oriented databases are kind of the future. I know other people might disagree with that statement, but they're just a lot more flexible, and it's a lot less likely that you're going to break something. So it's kind of nice as a developer, especially if you're building out an application and you don't know what the end data is going to look like. To use an object-oriented database, it's a really easy way to move quickly. But of course, if you're trying to do certain types of queries or you're doing something very complicated, you might want to look at a more traditional database. Um, as for good resources, there's lots of good ones. Uh, there's the for I guess it would be called For Zombies. Um, they have a bunch of things on all sorts of coding programs and coding languages. SQL is probably included in there. They'll have some good resources. It kind of gamifies the whole learning process. That's quite fun. Um, yeah, that would be my recommendation. Is really to actually try a hosted program, see if that works for you, and see if you can use actually like use it in a small scale application, so you can kind of get your footing in it. And I always say that like working from experience is going to be the fastest way that you're going to learn, because you really quickly learn, oh, I can't do this part, oh, I can do this part, and then you'll figure out what's essential to know instead of trying to learn it all.
There's a question here. Can you just repeat that resource? Was it the zombies? I know there's a whole host of sort of different programming languages. I'm trying to remember what the name of that one was. Do you have that off the top of your head?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I, just, I will get this right. Um, so if you look up SQL for zombies, that will teach you how to do standard queries. It's kind of a gamification for it. Just go to Google, look up SQL for zombies. It'll be one of the first ones. Um, they have a whole series of great coding little lessons you can do there as well for
Awesome.
specifics. Awesome. All right.
Awesome, Clayton. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And if you do have any additional questions, feel free to just message them in the chat, and we'll make sure we get them answered one way or another here. So, if you don't mind, Clayton, just sending it back to me here, and let's just continue with the last little bit. We got about a half hour to go, a half hour left here. And sort of on this topic of sharing resources, I do want to introduce you to a couple of additional tools. Now, in this workshop, I kind of allocated about 30 minutes for building your MVP, and you can absolutely do that. What I'll do is I'll kind of show you a couple of really powerful tools to be able to do so in short order. And then, feel free, if you've got an idea in mind on using these tools, to actually build out some sort of landing page where you're basically telling the user what problem you're solving, and maybe there's a call to action where you're trying to gauge interest by collecting email addresses or seeing how many people would be interested to sign up for more information, maybe a pre-order of something that you're wanting to give out into the marketplace to gauge the interest. So the tools that I want to share here with you, the first one is, you've probably heard, is MailChimp. And MailChimp is actually a fantastic tool for getting up and running, because it's kind of got everything built into it. And it's sort of a one-stop shop for getting set up with building out something like a landing page. So if you haven't had exposure to it before, let me just kind of run through some of the main features of Mailchimp here. So you've got the ability to create a handful of different assets here. We're going to kind of focus on this concept of a landing page. And so with the landing page, you're able to, let's say, you wanted maybe some sort of, let me just call it landing page academy or something. And it makes it very easy to kind of customize a page, basically building off some existing templates. So if I've got my landing page academy now set up here, I'm going to kind of pick, maybe I just want to get some lead generation, see how many people are interested in my service to build out landing pages for them. And can choose from a handful of different templates here. I'm just going to pick, and all of this that I'm doing is with a free account. I'm not paying at all for this account. So just going to pick out a simple lead gen template here. And the whole concept of how this page is constructed is with the idea of blocks. And so you've got things like text blocks, images, image groups, cards, all that kind of stuff here. And each one of these is completely customizable. So if, for example, I wanted to go here, maybe replace the default logo, I have the ability to sort of upload my assets here and be able to leverage them in my landing page. So I'm just going to put one up there. All this stuff here, completely customizable. If you wanted to add something new, you can simply just drag and drop a block. Just move this here. You can just drag and drop these different blocks that you've got access to and use them to kind of create your own content in between the template that's been given to you. So again, super easy to drag and drop the stuff, change the content, add your customization to it. So highly recommend sort of taking a little bit of time to play with this if you want to do it in a way where you don't have to rely on really knowing very much coding. And what's native with Mailchimp is all the analytics, which I'll show you in just a second here. So if you wanted to be able to sort of track, what kind of traffic you're getting, where you're getting that traffic from, the convention's been to use something like Google Analytics. So Google Analytics will provide you with a bit of tracking code. You can add that into your HTML code, but this is sort of all done natively here in Mailchimp. So let's take a look at the URL where your landing page will live. And of course, this is configurable. You can use a custom domain if you want to connect there. By default, you'll be given sort of this Mailchimp domain. You can also use a third-party service like Bitly, for example, and create something that's a little bit more tailored for essentially no cost, and then have this domain redirect to, or have that Bitly domain redirect to your Mailchimp domain here. You can sort of slice and dice as people sort of register with this landing page. You'll sort of create this audience, and then you can sort of dissect them and put them into different groups. Here's the tracking bit where you can track directly with Mailchimp. If you wanted to use a Facebook Pixel or Google Analytics, you can also add those options as well. But again, all in sort of one product. Don't really need to know any coding, and you can get up and running with something that looks relatively professional and works for the purposes of an MVP, where you're just trying to maybe gauge some initial feedback on a product or service that you're offering. And really that's it. So that's the landing page part, and on top of the landing page, so this is already live on the web here. If you go to this URL, and again, in terms of just being able to get something up and running quickly that's hosted for you, this costs you $0 to get this up and running, where you can now actually collect email addresses to gauge sort of an interest of your product. So that's one approach. If you do know a little bit of coding, let me introduce you to a couple of additional tools that will that could work extremely well. So there's a a cloud-based code editor that I love, which is called REPL. The website is repl.it, Replit. And what's fantastic about Replit is basically it's an online code editor with, it's actually a full-scale integrated development environment, but for most intents and purposes, it's your code editor that allows you to sort of code in over 50 different languages, and it's completely free to use. So if you're templating something or just trying a new coding language, you can basically start coding with all these different languages. There'll be interface provided to you where you can sort of test out any of these coding languages, go through any tutorials, any of the languages you might be interested in. And on top of that, there's templates that the community sort of builds. So with any of these templates, you can then have, for example, a React app template that you can work from. You've got a Flask template if you wanted to build a web app using Python. You've got a template for 3D animations. So all this is developed by the community, and you have access to it completely for free. So one way that I'm going to show you how you can build a landing page is there's a front-end framework called Bootstrap, which is probably the most popular front-end framework in the world. And if I simply just search for Bootstrap templates, there's a handful of these sites. The one I usually go to is the startbootstrap.com that offers a handful of free Bootstrap themes and templates. And I'm just going to take a look at a few of them. Some are paid for, but there's a handful of these that are completely free. And so if you wanted something that looks great and the intent is just to sort of gauge interest on your product or service, maybe something like this coming soon landing page will do the trick. And it's actually got a nice little built-in video file as well. So I'm going to now look at this on GitHub. And GitHub, again, is sort of like a social platform for developers, but more importantly, it's actually a code repository where you can push code that you write locally to the cloud and then be able to have other developers collaborate and work on your project. And Replit actually syncs really well with GitHub, which is another fantastic feature. So normally you'd want to create sort of your own version or sort of clone this to your own account, your own GitHub account, but I'm actually just going to do this directly from this existing template account. So all you really need to do is copy the URL, the GitHub URL, go back to Replit, and we're going to click Start Coding again. But instead of picking a particular language, I'm just going to import from GitHub. And I'm just going to paste that URL there to import this from GitHub. And what that's going to do is it's going to go to that repository in GitHub, pull all that content for that custom web page, and give me basically a copy of that I can now work with locally here, or well, basically in my account here on Replit. So this is going to take a second to load up here, but all the files are now available here, you can see. And there's really just two things you need to do here. One is just select the language that you want this app to be running. So this is going to be our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is typical for any front end. And this is going to be sort of the default configure run button here. And I'm just going to let that load. And now once that's set up, I now have in this Replit environment the ability to work with this front-end template that I've basically pulled off of an existing from a template. And if I run this, REPL actually provides you with a sort of a hosted solution here. So I'm just going to let this run. But basically, I'm going to have a hosted version of this website, again, completely for free, that I can now use in sort of a real world environment here. Let me just give it a second here. So again, just kind of walking through the steps, I literally went and looked for some Bootstrap templates, and that brought me to Start Bootstrap, which has got a handful of different templates to work from. And from there, I picked one that I wanted, which was this coming soon page. and then I can literally copy this GitHub. What you should do is, again, sort of clone this to your account so that you've got sort of your own version of this this repo to work with. But and for this example here, I just copied it and pasted that or imported it from that GitHub page so that now this is available for me to use in my Replit account. Now, do keep in mind that when you are using this free account, you know, you get a good chunk of the features with it. When you're trying to code and run stuff as you're sort of streaming this over Zoom, it might not be as performant, but for the most part, I haven't had too many issues with it. So here we go. Here's sort of the custom URL that's provided to you. And again, you can sort of adapt this if you want to create and use a custom domain, or use a third-party service like Bitly to be able to direct that custom domain to this one here. I'm just going to open this in a new tab. You can kind of see what this looks like. And again, if you know a little bit of HTML, you can go to your index.html, which is really one of two places where you probably want to focus any attention to sort of customizing this page. And maybe I'll change this instead of January 2019. This is coming soon for September 2020. And just update that. And now this is, again, this is live on the web. Anybody can go to this website. They can go in and see this. And you can actually go to MailChimp to create sort of an embedded form template where you get the HTML code. Use that for this form here. And now you've connected this custom Bootstrap template page with MailChimp. So you're collecting all the emails or all the data that you might want to collect. And you've got the back end of MailChimp with its analytics and its sort of user management there for you. Okay, maybe I'll just pause there. Anybody have any questions? I feel like I just like unloaded a bunch of information there. So again, a couple of different ways. One, if you just want to go with the pure MailChimp route, highly recommend that if you're not very much of a coder or not comfortable with that. Super easy to use. Looks like PJ here also offered another suggestion, which I'm always open to the community to get some more ideas. So MailTrain being another tool. With MailChimp, you can get all your templates provided for you. Very easy to edit it and be able to build it out with tracking and some basic analytics. And then this was sort of another option where Replit is a fantastic free IDE to be able to build your templates or simply copy and paste from a template that you like in the community, and then be able to use just your HTML skills here to do some customization or connect this with MailChimp. And this is all hosted for you. Again, I haven't paid a dime for any of this stuff here. This is all publicly and freely available. Vikram, sorry, by basic coding guide or video, you mean on this particular session, or you mean just coding in general? Coding in general. Yeah, so that that kind of brings me to a couple things. One, there's a handful of coding videos where, completely for free, even if you go to Udemy or Coursera, there's tons of good resources out there. In addition to that, what I do is I run coding courses through Surrey Digital Academy, part-time courses for adults as well as courses for kids. And so that's more the in-person instruction and a little bit more of a guided resource. But there's tons of things on both Udemy and Coursera that I would recommend. Even Code Academy is still a fantastic tool. They've kind of morphed a little bit more into a premium, or I guess it's a freemium model where you get some basic things that are free and then a few things that are more detailed courses you'd have to pay for. But between the three of them, you've got some fantastic coding guides and plenty of videos to work from. So got about 15 minutes left. I'm happy to stay on here, and if anyone's got any questions as they want to play around with the Mailchimp tool or with Replit, and tying it in with the Bootstrap template, happy to spend some time and kind of walk you through any issues you might have. The only other thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that with Surrey Digital Academy, we've got our next sort of full stack web dev course coming up on September 15th. That runs for 6 weeks with sort of a 5-hour commitment. And we've kind of designed this to be a fairly unique web development course from sort of what else is offered in the marketplace, geared for entrepreneurs, professional development, or if you're evaluating a career in coding. The idea is really building that muscle memory and being able to do stuff well outside of this course. So the whole idea is, can you get an app up and running, being able to sort of hack or MacGyver is some of the terms that were used here in this workshop, be able to get up and running with an application and then have those skills in place so that you can then continue your development of your digital projects well into the future. And so that's sort of the core focus of this full stack course, which starts on September 15. So if you're interested, feel free to message me. And happy to share some insight into it with what other sort of students have built, and give you some feedback on whether this might be the best resource for you. Peter, yes, it is designed for beginners. It obviously helps if you've got a little bit of experience, but it is sort of geared for folks who may be starting with little to no coding experience.
So I'm actually gonna just jump off the call. Thanks so much for having me, Harish. If anybody has any questions, you can reach me. I'll let Harish pass on my email address. I do want to mention that the embarrassing website is the coding experience I had before, and the website I'm more than happy to share with investors is the final version that I did after taking the course. So it's really well worth the while to take. I could not plug it more. It's just one of the best courses I've taken. Thanks, Harish.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to appreciate it.
And thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure being able to speak to you and share a little bit of knowledge. So thanks.
Thanks, Clayton. Thanks again for taking the time to do this. Okay, thanks everyone. Again, happy to stick around for a little bit.